Hello and welcome to the post-match Q&A on True Faith. Newcastle United 1, Sheffield United 0. Fans back in the stadium at St James's Park. A great sight to see on a lovely day as well in the northeast. My name's Emil Franchi, joined tonight by Chris, who hasn't got a voice at the minute. I think he's just muted himself. But here we are to discuss the game. It is 1-0 to Newcastle United. A job done, Chris, do you think? It was more of a necessary thing that we just had to just get out the way?
I think so. It's a bit of a strange one. Had the air of a testimonial a little bit in the two sides kind of turning up, fulfilling a fixture. We've talked about that a lot this season. And just I think people were there just to watch a game. Didn't really matter as long as it wasn't an awful result, how the game went. But yeah, fulfilling the fixture, I think.
Yeah, and it was good to see people back in there. We saw a lot of build up before the game. Everyone kind of just taking pictures, being back there. Even the journalists seemed a bit brighter about it, and yeah, it felt like a bit like last day of school. You know, players get to bring a game in and that kind of thing. They're all having just a bit of an end of season blowout. However, it started off a little bit lackluster. I did see a few reports of people saying that we're getting done over by Sheffield United already, and that was the nightmare kind of start. But what did you think of the first half?
I mean, we started for the first couple of minutes, like a house on fire, and there were shots when the teams lined up of Jacob Murphy in particular, just beaming. So I think that's a delight on the players' part. For the first couple of minutes, a couple of good runs forward. I think Miggy had a really good one. And then, after the first couple of minutes, I think we had a corner or two. Sheffield United had, kind of got stuck into the game a bit. And I thought, generally, we were pretty poor for probably the first half of the first half, if not the first 35 minutes. And then a couple of runs forward from Maximan, you could hear on the TV. I'd love to have been there. The crowd going up and just getting kind of stuck into it. And then I think tails up a little bit, and that resulted obviously in the goal. And great to see Joe Willock scoring yet again. God knows what that has done for his price tag. He was already out of reach. Now he's a Galactico. But yeah, it was a good result, if not a great performance all the way through.
Yeah, I think that, getting the 3 points certainly makes up slightly for the fact that we lost to them down at Bramall Lane, which is something that we're just going to have to shut from our memory this season. Once again, Newcastle losing to a relegated team and being one of their only wins this season. We've just got a message from Charlotte there saying, Alex is saying that it was mostly dreadful. Yeah, I think the game as a whole, from what I saw, we just didn't seem to have end product apart from that good little cross in from, the combination of Sam Maximan, then Murphy crossing the ball into Willock's header in there. But yeah, we just didn't seem to have any outlets. And certainly by the end, when people were wearing thin, it just didn't seem to happen. Every time the ball got past, we had Almiron running wild like he's done so well recently. But then when he gets to the top there, it just kind of falls short. So did anyone kind of stand out for you in this one, Chris?
I mean, you'd have to say Joe Willock just for the goal. But I don't think anyone had a really stand-up performance. It was, turning up, doing the job. A couple of good runs forward. Obviously, some Maximan. We've seen it all season. I don't think it was one of his best performances. He was against a very poor side. And, I don't think we can miss out that Sheffield United are a really bad side. They couldn't cope with him. But it wasn't his best performance. But I think he did a pretty decent job. Almiron had some good runs forwards. But yeah, no one particularly stood out, I wouldn't say, on either side.
Yeah, well, Sam's kind of summed it up in the comment there. Do send yours in if you want anything to ask. But yeah, turgid, desperate struggle of a performance, nothing to inspire the fans in attendance or give hope going forward. Chris, on a few like the previews and things like that, we did speak about how Newcastle United are going to build for the next season. Seeing Sheffield United and Fulham as two games where, in effect, we can maybe, well, like Sam says, inspire and give hope. But from my point of view, with that game, it seemed like that was the game where we started to get ourselves on the beach. We've been talking about it for a few weeks now that players might be on the beach. We had two games, Leicester and Man City, where it looked as though we put in some very good performances, but this one is where it dropped off. Do you think that enough was done in this one to make the 10,000 or so that were there feel that this can carry forward into the next season?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'm sure the novelty of being back in the ground, just the excitement, even watching it on TV, it was kind of little spine tingling moments there, the thought of actually being there. So I was in that moment envious, but no, I don't think either, whether you were watching it at home or watching it in the ground, if you were lucky enough to be there and watch that relatively poor performance, I don't think there was enough necessary to inspire. I think we've said it pretty much over the last couple of months since the form really picked up and Joe Willock started banging them in, that there is, in the playing squad, there are kind of good green shoots there. But there's two kind of concerns for me. Firstly, around obviously the management. We've discussed that to death. I don't think we need to that much. But the other element that is key is if this side is to kick on and harness the good players that we do have, and there is a good squad there. There is a squad there that could get mid-table, possibly top 10 if coached correctly. I think there's got to be some degree of investment though, and I think even notions of cobbling together 20, 30 million to bring in Joe Willock this summer is fast becoming a fantasy. So yeah, the coach and lack of investment are concerns, but no, I didn't. I think I would agree with you that probably were on the beach, especially after Joe Willock scored that goal, because we've seen time and time again this season, if you've watched anything of Sheffield United, 1-0 defeats, that's what they do. So one goal, I think, for us, and the players are fully aware that borderline job done tonight.
Yeah, definitely. It did look as though, we knew we were playing against a team that doesn't win games very often. I think the only problem that we could have had is if Sheffield United had scored first, which Everton had the other day, which seems to be their only way of doing it. They'll get the confidence, score early, and then do something with that. But they just didn't look up to it today. They looked like a championship club. I think I looked at the lineup and I said, it's the most championship looking lineup I've ever seen. I barely know half the players. They're all names which just look like they're going to help them prop up that table next season. But yeah, Newcastle are up to 15th. We go into Fulham with yes, yeah, big celebrations there. But 15th in the table, 42 points. We've not matched the magic number just yet, have we? Or are we around that mark going into Fulham?
I think we've got a couple of points to go. So
right.
If we beat Fulham, we exceed the magic mark and the mighty Rafa, I believe.
Yes, there he is just behind me watching over our shoulder there. I should block him out while we're talking about him like this. But yeah, I mean, going into Fulham, it's going to be interesting. But Charlotte said, and Sam has said as well about the injuries. They are dropping like flies, days off, conditioning work. I am not a specialist in this field, unfortunately, Chris, and you're probably not either. But what is going on? I mean, is it something to do with just the fact that the training isn't adequate to keep these injuries out, and going back to Rafa's ways and the way that we didn't really seem to get too many? Is it pure, are we just unlucky that we're not getting this, or is it the sheer intensity of the amount of games that we've had in the last few weeks?
Like you, I'm no expert. I'm no Dr. Shipman. Let's not even go there. But yeah, I mean, we've discussed for a couple of years since Bruce came in, the kind of increase in muscle injuries, players going down, clutching various parts of hamstrings, etc. I think, partially, I think it's probably that kind of coaching and the medical staff. Something's going on there. I think also just partly, reflective of the season. Players that have been playing week in, week out and have kind of maybe reached that kind of end. The question is, and I know that, in Bruce's mind, we'll be reaching that magic points mark that he has kind of talked about, and I'm sure he's gunning for. There is the question, if these players have been playing week in, week out, and the medical staff, they're not idiots, they're professionals at a Premier League club. They know what they're doing. If players are going into the red zone or whatever you call it, surely there's the case for bringing in someone like Matty Longstaff, who we've long talked about on the podcast, really is deserving of a chance. What has happened with him? There are other players as well. Could you have started Dwight Gale, Sean Longstaff, etc.? There's multiple players that could have been brought in. So, I mean, this of all the games this season, and maybe we'll see it at Fulham, but there was definitely a case for a rotation here. And yet again, Steve Bruce picking the same side week in, week out. Not an expert, but it just does seem like a slightly strange decision given the kind of testimonial friendly nature of the game.
Yeah, and I guess that, part of me feels that Steve Bruce's mind thinks, well, the fans are coming in, so we'll show them the players that they're longing to see. But yeah, it is quite annoying. We've talked so much about Elliot Anderson as well, who could slot into things if we are feeling a little bit under the weather. But there was a point towards the end where we had Willock on the floor, Sam Maximan had just gone off, and then Dubravka was holding his hamstring, and Bruce didn't really know what to do. Willock ended up coming off.
He contributes so much. How could you forget Joelinton?
Of course, yeah. Well, about half-time mark, of course. But yeah, you're right. Like Joelinton holding his hand up straight away, and Dwight Gale coming on, and then again, by the end we didn't know what to do. Dubravka was down. Bruce is looking around, so what does he do? Bring on Andy Carroll. I half expected him to put Carroll in goal at that point. I thought, this is it. This can be the big send-off of Andy Carroll probably at St James's Park. But yeah, it doesn't look great, and just as well that we're safe, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this squad is kind of operating at probably its limit. And you don't necessarily think you look at that bench, and there are players there that could possibly do a job, but it doesn't exactly inspire hope there. So it does need a bit of a shot in the arm, I think, in the summer. But will we get it? Probably not.
Do you think that we might see some of these younger players play on Sunday just out of the fact that we have to play them?
I think we've got to see Matty Longstaff on Friday.
Even though he doesn't exist according to Charlotte,
he doesn't exist.
He's a forgotten man.
Our imagination, the phantom that is Matty Longstaff, might appear spectrally against Fulham on the weekend. Maybe a couple of other players. I think Anderson, he's just come back from injury. He might be on the bench. We may not see him. Christian Atsu's in the squad.
He is, yeah.
Hasn't been seen since he got put back in the squad in January. Given the injury to Dubravka, we might see Gillespie, which we haven't seen enough of him to kind of make a judgment, really. I think maybe Han might be forced. There might be a couple of players in the 11 and maybe a couple more on the bench, and maybe some from the under-21s that we haven't necessarily seen. So, yeah, it might be interesting. Obviously, there's kind of, in the grand scheme of things, there's nothing to play for against Fulham. I think the only thing there is to play for is Steve Bruce's, his line in the summer that he's going to kind of be, pointing and shall forevermore to kind of the points total that he has achieved or might achieve, and the fantastic job that he has done. He has not done a fantastic job, but that's how we all probably think about it.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think that's probably, it's a bit weird because they were going to do a lap of honour at the end there and walk around. It'd be interesting to see the reception for Bruce and the players, because I did see there was talk of some chants going round. There was a few directed at Bruce, the usual lot directed at Ashley. And obviously, given what's gone on in the last 12 months with the takeover, there's been a little bit of stick towards the Premier League. But yeah, it seems like we celebrated the Man City game more than we did this one, and we've won and got 3 points from this one. But then that comes with the way that these games work. You're playing against champions or the bottom of the league. We've had the two extremes here, so very strange to see how Newcastle react to it. I've just seen that Matty Longstaff was on the bench, so again, just disproving all of these conspiracy theories that are going around on True Faith.
Well, I didn't see a shot of him on Sky, so
no, it was a lookalike. I think
I haven't seen him with my own eyes through my TV.
Sean in an orange wig, we said the other day, that might be there. So, but yeah, Sam makes another good point. He's making all the points tonight. If anyone wants to just chuck in with a Q&A there, just ask us away. He says, with Bruce's ego, don't rule out hoying himself on against Fulham. It might happen. Are we short at the back still? We could see Bruce on there, and he's got quite a good goal scoring record in the Premier League, if I remember rightly, with Manchester United. So perhaps that will happen. Just a quick bit on fans there. Chris, we spoke about how good it is to see in there. How much do you think this is important now going forward, just for the fan base as a whole?
I think it's crucial. I think we've really missed it as fans. I think obviously the players have missed it, and I referenced Jacob Murphy lining up at the start and just this beam on his face. Yes, he is a Newcastle fan, but I think any player with a pulse is going to be motivated, you would hope, although not that we saw it in the performance necessarily tonight, but you would hope if the chips were down and it wasn't actually a competitive game, that they would be motivated by fans being there. We've all missed it. I think the Premier League, even if you look at it in a cold business financial way, has lost its spectacle. It's not the same without fans. It was a delight to not have the kind of cold, sterile feel of the fake crowd noise tonight, even though I prefer that to the kind of the void that is the kind of vacuum of not having anyone personally on the kind of soundtrack. But yeah, so it was good to kind of hear the songs of old, the chants of old, Ashley, the Ashley chants, the chants about the players, just the songs. It was great. And yeah, I can't wait to get back there the next season. Away games, home games. Yeah, absolutely gagging for next season to start, even though the football's going to be turgid once again, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. And, I really want to think that we could get more out of it. But there was an interesting thing today as well. Obviously, fans going back in, but unable to see our now player of the season, Callum Wilson. It was announced today. He got handed what looked like a trophy for an under-16s thing, where it was just about that large, holding it in his hands for a player that has brought so much. And it's such a shame that we haven't been able to see Callum Wilson because, again, we go back to Man City and we look at that game and think Wilson could have won it. Again, if he was on the pitch today, we might have banged in maybe 3 or 4. We might have seen him get his hat-trick for Newcastle, which would have been a delight. He is going to be very important next season. And we've touched on injuries there, Chris. How do we keep him fit? How do we utilise Wilson and even Saint-Maximin going forward? Because we've seen how bad we are without. What do we need to do?
I think he's become and proved himself to be so crucial this season. It's been fantastic to see, a proper striker leading the line for us, and he's everything that we've missed, arguably, since Demba Ba. However, he does have a track record of injuries, and how many games did he play this season? 22 or something. Missed a significant portion of the season, and arguably we got relatively lucky with him because his record suggests that he could have missed more. So I think what is key to keeping Wilson crucial for us, I think, will be getting an alternative to Callum Wilson. And Dwight Gale, as good as he has been, as great a servant as he has been to the club, he got a decent run out tonight, but he's arguably not the answer. He's not the deputy. We need to sign Willock, and we need to sign a quality backup for Wilson. There are players out there that fit that bill. It's whether the club recognise that it is an issue. Callum Wilson's great. He's fantastic. I'd love to see him play every game of the season. I think he could have easily gotten into 20 plus goals this season. He's motivated. I think if he was playing tonight, even though the squad was, on the beach, to use that cliche, he was gunning for 15 goals plus this season. He seems disappointed with 12. I think he would have given it his all. But the reality of the situation is he's injury prone. We need an alternative. There's a lot of games in the season. Next season's going to be harder yet again. There's some good sides coming up. We just need a backup. We need an alternative, and the club need to recognise that.
Yeah, and if we are talking about signing Willock permanently, then it's just going to be, again, 20 million on Willock, and then what are we looking at trying to get another Shefki Kuki kind of loan deal in for a striker? I mean, the thing is, as Willock proves, we sometimes do have the occasional golden loan which can lead to something else. I know that Kennedy didn't exactly work out when the second season came around, but his goals were vital in keeping us up, or at least fighting to get into that 10th, 11th place. So yeah, maybe a lone striker behind could help, providing that Wilson stays fit, because Wilson up front with Saint-Maximin does seem to be the key, especially with Almiron running just behind. Charlotte asking about Alan Saint-Maximin's comments in the press today. Is this all about him leaving? Is he getting picked up by Roma? Is the all talk of him going already? Is that why he left the pitch today?
I haven't read them or listened to them in detail. I think this is Charlotte referring to the TalkSport interview that he gave, where he basically said Newcastle shouldn't be fighting relegation every season, which I think any right-thinking fan would completely agree. And it's good to hear that he's not, touting that move, giving those kind of cliche "come get me, please," etc. And nor would we expect it from him. But I think what it does do, and justifiably, I think, I think any of us would be, if we were in that position, doing the same thing, is reminding the club that there is rightly a sense of ambition that we should have, and that if that ambition is not fulfilled, next season, if we're in the same situation next season, justifiably he could be looking for a move. He's been fantastic for us. I don't want to see him leave. I would love to see him play for us forever. Frankly, he's a delight to watch on the ball. I can't remember the last player that I saw and enjoyed the same way as him, possibly Ben Arthur, but I think Saint-Maximin arguably at this point does it more consistently and has a better attitude, even though we have heard about his negative attitudes previously and when he kind of joined. But I think it's justifiable that if we're in the same position next season, he could leave. I think it's a warning shot that the club need to act in the summer to sign Willock, to sign another striker, to be better, to be more ambitious, I think.
Yeah, well, I hope so. And we've mentioned again, I think I said it a couple of weeks ago about Steve Bruce. He seems to be the guy, unfortunately, that can get in Mike Ashley's ear, speak to him and say, look, this is what I need. And if that means getting Willock in the same way that we've got plenty of them, hopefully something will change. Julian asks, are there any genuine reasons to believe that next season won't be as dire as this season? Well, I can't answer that one because, again, we started this season with a win at West Ham. West Ham, who are still knocking on the door of Champions League. They've probably lost it now, but going to have their Alan Pardew season as we once had, where we broke into Europe and had a lovely time in that. And they probably will suffer next season as a result of it, because it seems to be that there's always one team doing it. We've seen glimmers in the last 5 or 6 weeks where we have shown that we can be better. And I think that is the thing now. We need to take what we've seen, maybe not so much this game, but the last few weeks. Tottenham, Liverpool, I know we didn't win them, but we showed great resolve to come back in those games. Manchester City, where we did go ahead 3-2 and got taken down by world-class players or future world-class players in the likes of Ferran Torres. But yeah, there's no reason to say why we can't. It just always comes down to the talking down of the club by our manager, which is ridiculous when you think about it. I've always said that I wanted to give Bruce a chance at the start. I think everyone gave him a fair crack of the whip, even though we knew it wasn't the ideal situation. And yeah, next season's going to be interesting because, fingers crossed, nothing changes. We're going to have fans in every step of the way. And that's the strange thing that I still forget with Bruce. He's had a season and a half, no fans in, which I don't think any manager which has put in that kind of performance has ever been afforded. So it's a very unique position that Steve Bruce has had, where the entire run of 2 crunch parts of his season haven't had fans there. So we've seen the worst of it as we limped over the finish line last season, and I guess that this season we've seen a finish where we've come out strong and finished it very well, and salvaged something that didn't look possible back in the start of this year when Brighton happened, because I think most fans were done at that point. We signed ourselves off. Good night, Fulham are going to come back, and there we are. So I think that if the end of this season is anything to go by, there's no reason why we have to settle for an excuse saying we can't do that again and start off and maybe do what, I don't know, Everton, maybe not Everton, petering out how they have, but they're do what West Ham have done. Why can't we do what West Ham have done? They've got questionable owners that do invest, but probably don't have the fans' full backing. But then people like the 2 Davids, they've said they could get into Europe, so why can't we? But then I guess that's a worry, isn't it, Chris, if we got into Europe, because we don't know what will happen after that.
Yeah, I mean, we can dream, can't we? It's just any kind of ambition would be good. A modicum of ambition would be good. We have become that zombie club that just is happy with mediocre return. I think the club has a lot of ingredients for success. It has a good starting 11. It has a hugely passionate fan base. It is now a once again, thank God, perennial in the Premier League. But so I think this whole thing of Mike Ashley wanting the club to kind of live within its means, if it's managed correctly by a manager that has the credentials and ability to get good performances, then I think we can aspire to be better. I think we've proven since we came up from the Championship that we can be a top 10 side, and from there it's just a couple of places further up, signing a couple of good players, good performances, a bit of luck as well, I think could kind of get us over that line. But it's just time and time again. And I think the real concern for me, and someone's put it in the comments about, will Bruce get a new contract?
Just not coming to that yet.
Yeah, sorry. The worry is that if this takeover, we talk about Matty Longstaff being a phantom, this takeover is, to my mind, a phantom. It's been going on forever. We haven't heard anything about it. Get it done, or more realistically, don't, and move on and get someone else. If the takeover continues to kind of just hang there, Steve Bruce will get a new contract. As long as it doesn't take us into the relegation zone, as long as we're not rooted bottom of the table. We've seen this season that the owners of the club, Mike Ashley, will just stick in with Steve Bruce. He's very happy for him to just sit there. And the worry is that if the takeover doesn't happen, then Steve Bruce, I think, is very minded to take another payday, to just continue. He, I think, has accepted the very unambitious ambitions of the ownership. They're content with those kind of just staying in the division, and he's accepted that. I think he proclaims to be a Newcastle fan. He's arguably the only Newcastle fan in existence that is happy with that, because the rest of us aren't.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, is it 1 year left on his contract now? By rights, everyone has been talking about it. Many journalists, one journalist has said that he will get a new contract if he keeps us up, and I'm inclined to agree with that, because, like you say, he is steadying the ship while whatever's happening in the background is going on. And in a way, even if that wasn't there, he can just carry on, just doing and just sustaining Newcastle. We shouldn't just be sustained. We should be always striving for more. I mean, Sam could get some great suggestions out of this one, but will we get an end of season statement from Charnley, Ashley, and what sort of crap would it include? For me, I would just say, if you take a copy of what was said towards the end of one of the Rafa seasons about investment, every penny, change the words around slightly, Sam, and I think you'll get pretty much what they might say. But I think, looking at it logically, they might come out and say perhaps a thank you to the fans and Steve Bruce for this season. Again, I go back to my earlier point. I think that because we are in such a unique situation, it's very hard to see how anything can be spun to say, like, oh, what's going to happen next. I think that this season was the whole thing. This game kind of sums it up. The whole season itself was just we had to do it. We had to go through with it. We knew there wasn't going to be much changes as soon as the takeover fell through and has dragged on. But yeah, what do you think, Chris? I must just pop to take my oven off, if that's all right. If you just carry on, I just need to quickly make sure I don't burn the house down.
It's just you and me, viewers. Yeah, I mean, anything that Mike Ashley or Lee Charnley come out with, it might as well just be an A4 page worth of poo emojis, because it's not going to have anything of worth. It's going to be things that we've seen before. It's that the press and fans that have done down the playing squad are unnecessarily unfair. Steve Bruce has done a good job, etc., etc. Copy and paste, and infinitum. We've seen it before. We'll see it again.
Yeah, exactly. Keith getting very scared there, saying he doesn't want to hear Mike Ashley say staying at NUFC until we win something again. Remember, Keith, that's only when we are in dire straits and facing relegation on the final day. That's the only time that Mike Ashley will come out and say something like that. It needs to be when something is hurting him, potentially. But then we've seen 2 relegations and it didn't hurt him one bit, unfortunately.
I would point out that Steve Bruce won Manager of the Month, which is arguably a collective achievement, therefore a club achievement. Does that count?
Well, I believe they're on the pitch right now doing a full presentation. If they are perhaps doing that and going for it. But it's again, looking at the end of the season, we never really know. But my advice would be, don't expect too much. Don't expect anything really. NFC Clarkey 24 mentioning about Ritchie getting the armband. I think it's worth talking about Matt Ritchie, and it was good to see that he got response that he did today. Still fighting to the end. Can't get an injury, it would seem. He's one of the only players who can't. I would say that he's just so full of rage that it actually stops him from getting anything. It fights it off, these blood cells that he's got in him. But yeah, I mean, Chris, what do you think about Ritchie? I mean, again, countless times we've mentioned over the past few weeks that he has been the key since the shoulder barge incident. I would go so far to say that, Clarkey's right. We are in the division because of Matt Ritchie's passion.
Yeah, and I have to serve myself up some humble pie and custard at this point because
Yes.
Earlier in the season, I was advocating for Matt Ritchie to be sold to Bournemouth. And how wrong am I? I totally agree. I think he'd be a far more effective captain than arguably either Shelvey, who's currently vice captain, and obviously with Lascelles being injured, has stepped in, or arguably Lascelles, who I think has diminished as both a defender and a character and leader over the last couple of seasons. I really like Jamal Lascelles, maybe Shelvey, not so much. But yeah, Matt Ritchie has really stepped in, and I think it's not too much to say that he has been one of the architects of saving our season alongside Joe Willock, Sir Maximan and Callum Wilson. I would be gutted if he left in the summer, and there have been rumblings over the last couple of days of him possibly moving on, as was touted in January. Now, I feel very differently to how I did in January. I would be quite sad to see him go. He's getting on, but I think what he might lack in a yard of pace or possibly even ability, because he's never been a world beater. He's been solid and dependable, but never a world beater. But with the passion that he has, I think he plays above himself week in, week out. And he, not just that, he elevates the players around him. So yeah, he'd be a huge loss. And yeah, arguably captain material. If we want to cash in on John Joe Shelvey, I don't know how much we get for him, but maybe we could use those funds to keep Willock. If Steve Bruce is serious about building a side around Joe Willock, that's a potential way to do it.
Yeah, and Daniel's pointed out, says 6 goals, 6 games, unreal. I think he's matching something of Cissé's record. That is up there. I mean, again, going back to January transfers, Kennedy, Cissé have to be the last 2 that have made such an impact. And Cissé, I mean, he was incredible. Let's just hope he doesn't go on to become the most offside player in history if he plays next season with us. It's interesting what you say there. About Matt Ritchie. I personally, when there was the rumours and rumblings in the first place last summer when Fraser and Wilson came in about taking Ritchie to Bournemouth in a trade-off, and we ended up keeping him in that quite hilarious clip that Andy Carroll put up in Jesmond, I would have been gutted to see Ritchie leave then. And a lot of fans do see Ritchie as this Kevin Nolan-esque player who is a captain of the team. I would prefer to see Ritchie as vice. I think that Lascelles is maybe, like you say, he's diminished, but I don't think that Steve Bruce is the type of guy that is ever going to take an armband away from a player. And that ultimately comes down to it. And we can dream, we can hope, but the only way that a captain changes now is new manager. Hence why Lascelles got it in the first place. And gave it to Lascelles when he stood up and did his bit. That's not taken away from Lascelles and the service that he's done for the club, but unfortunately the defensive displays have gone down. You just have to hope that we maybe bring back Lejeune, perhaps. That's another question that's going to be around there. It's interesting, Rory's literally just put in, who is your back four for next season with Lejeune coming back after getting player of the year for Deportivo. I mean, that is quite incredible. But yeah, that is interesting. Where do you start on that one, Chris?
I think Rory's made the assumption that it's the back four rather than back five, but because that's the question, we'll go with back four. I think for me, it's in the centre. It's got to be Lejeune and probably Fernandez. As I say, I do like Lascelles, but Fernandez has quietly gone around this job and been solid. So in the centre, them on the left, then do you go for Richie or do you go for Lewis? I think one of the real sad stories of the second half of the season is how Lewis, he didn't play necessarily well, but he's a good young player who needs development. It's a really crucial stage for his career. It's really sad that he hasn't had those opportunities, partly through his own kind of the way that he played in that really bad spell. But Richie has profited from that, and credit to him. So I think on current form or recent form, probably going to go Richie. And then on the right, who goes on the right? That's the question.
For me, I would have to say Manquillo. Yeah. Really. I like Manquillo, and I think that he's been very handy for us. We've seen there's bits in this season where a lot of people have said Manquillo, we missed him. Sometimes when he comes back, he doesn't quite deliver to the same level that you want, but I still think that he's got a good little run on him, and that is something I think we. Now that Yedlin's gone, we don't really have the attacking winger that we have there. And I think I have to agree with you. Fernandez, for me, has always been the player that has outshone quietly, as you say. And he's tall as well. Tall, same as Lejeune. I know Lascelles is, and Lascelles is fast, but they just seem switched on, calm and composed. And I would even go so far to say that Kieran Clark sometimes shows a little bit more composure than Lascelles when really under pressure. Because Lascelles has got that horrible habit of backing off, back off. And then the rest of the team do it. And you're like, put a bloody challenge in, please, for God's sake. They're getting close to the goal. So yeah, the back four next season, it does hinge on Lejeune coming back. But then, going back to what we said about Saint-Maximin, if he's talking about a team challenging at the bottom every season and Newcastle United shouldn't be that team, why should Lejeune leave the club where he's just had the season of his life, where he's been sent out? It's a shame if he leaves like he does, because I still think that he is a fantastic defender who had a really bad rap. Yeah. And a bad rap last year as well when he came back from injury so quickly, only to get injured again. And most fans to say he was a disaster in those games. I think it was it the two losses around New Year, Everton and Leicester, where Lejeune came back and everyone thought, oh God, which probably made a lot of people go, well, let him go, let him have that season. But Rich has said, never mind Richie, the reinvention of Murphy, as our very own Alexander Arnold has been a revelation. He's laughing, but it's true. He's always laughing, is Rich. But yeah, that's a very good point. And again, we touched on it earlier. Murphy's ball into Willock today. Murphy's passion and yes, being a fan of the club helps, but his vibrance when he's come back since Sheffield Wednesday, he's got to be in there.
Yeah, I think he's you say reinvention, Rich. I think the rehabilitation of Murphy has been one of the stories of the season. Let's not forget that he was out on loan for the last couple of seasons. I think it was Chef Weds last season, and under Rafa, brought in amid a decent amount of fanfare for a decent amount of money under Ashley. Didn't quite cut it, but for whatever you say about those loan spells, they've done him some good. And I think he's come back and he's really contributed a lot this season. A couple of goals. He looks handy. He's good on the ball. I think he's really grown in confidence, grown in technical skill, and he offers us a lot. Whether he'll be in the starting 11 next season, not so sure, but I think he does offer us something from the bench. And crucially, he's versatile. He doesn't just play in one position. He can play, in a few positions, arguably on both sides of the pitch if needs be. So yeah, I think I really like him, and he's a Newcastle fan. He's an adopted Geordie, much like myself, not from the area, but a Newcastle fan. So I do like that.
Yeah, I feel really strongly about Murphy because he did get a lot of stick. And he was hoisted in there, but he did have a few games. I don't know if you remember, Chris, when I think it was against Stoke where he scored the winner. It was like a 1-0 away win down there. Very rare that we even managed that, but it was a great little run from him. And yeah, he did get sent out, but that was kind of Rafa's way. And sometimes Rafa's decision we trusted because we thought, well, if he's doing that, it's part of another thing. Whereas if Bruce sends someone out on loan, you're like, are we going to see this guy ever again? So going back to Lejeune there, it does happen. Keith, just correcting me there. Thank you very much. Papi Cissé got 9 goals in 6. Yes, he was incredible, wasn't he? But I agree with you there, Keith. I think that a loan is the only way, simply because Arsenal would be mad to let a player of that ability go when every season we remind them that they had a perfectly good centre midfielder that they've been crying out for in the form of Isaac Hayden. So if they sold another one to Newcastle, we'd end up like Sunderland taking on Manchester United rejects by the end of it. Another one, Cher, who we forgot to mention there, actually, B. Gardner saying, it's a funny one again, because I think Cher's great and we've tried him in every position. But when you've got players like Fernandes and Lejeune in there, it's difficult to find a spot for him. And if this season's anything to go by, he seems frustrated as well. We've got quote of the year. Everyone had a shit game, which was brutally honest. But yeah, what do you reckon? Another player that has probably seen his last days at Newcastle?
I really like Cher. I think he's a very good player. There's a reason that he's an international footballer and has been solidly for quite a few years. I think it was a real masterstroke signing him for not a lot of money. He's very good. But as you kind of allude to, as you referenced, there are, if you're talking about the centre-back positions, there are 5 or 6 players there for 2, max 3 positions. He's clearly frustrated. He could move to a good club. He's, how old is he? 28 or something? It's around about the time where he needs kind of a good move. I think we've whatever happens, we've got to extend his contract. We've got that option to take another year, even if it's just to get a bit of value out of him, because he could command a pretty decent fee. It's really sad that we're talking about tactically how we get the most out of Cher as a sale, because he's really good and he could offer something. And you never know, if we don't keep Lejeune, maybe Cher does have a future. But I can't see a world where we retain Fernandes, Clark, Lascelles, Lejeune and Cher. 2 of those are going to go. And it's probably going to be one of Lejeune or Cher, if not both. Either one of those is a loss to my mind. We are in a situation now that we do have a good clutch of central defenders. So, I mean, I would keep him, but I can totally understand why he may be leaving in the summer.
Yeah, just saying there from Dale about Dummett signing up for another season. It's quite remarkable, but Newcastle do seem to have a tendency to re-sign a lot of these veterans now. Believe it or not, Dummett is no longer 18. No, he's now an old man playing there at the back, but again having a bit of renaissance. So I think Dummett's a handy little player to have, and he never puts in too much of a bad shift and scored the odd goal either as well the other week. Rory's asking about the truth in the reports about Adam Armstrong. I mean, that rears its head every single transfer window. Is he going to come back? Is he not? He's done well in the Championship, but I worry about Adam Armstrong, that he might be not as good as Dwight Gale. And we've seen it. He's very good in the Championship. And I know that Dwight Gale is a very good striker in the Championship as well, but I think that both of them are very similar level. And if Dwight Gale is struggling now to do this, then Armstrong coming up might be a question. But then again, we've seen players come up and do it. Bamford, very good season. But again, Bamford's playing in a team where they have remarkable service. So Adam Armstrong's a bit of another one where we might not supply him the way that a Championship club do. And again, we still don't have the system that can do that. And, a backup striker we were talking about before, Chris, do you think that Armstrong is a decent option, or do you think that ship has sailed?
I think the rationale for Adam Armstrong is twofold. Firstly, that he used to play for us as a Newcastle fan. And secondly, and perhaps more concerningly, and what it says about Mike Ashley's Newcastle, is that we apparently have a 40% clause in his contract that whatever Blackburn sell him for, we get. So it's a cynical move, because we would save drastically on buying him over an equivalent striker of the same age, of the same talent elsewhere. I totally agree with you with the comparisons with Dwight Gale. I think he's a very good striker at that level. Whether or not he could do it At Premier League, I'm not necessarily so sure. I don't think he is the backup for Callum Wilson that we need. I think Callum Wilson is going to be the number one striker next season and should be. I think we need someone that is closer to his level than Adam Armstrong or indeed Dwight Gale are. We need someone kind of between those two levels, I think. So, yeah, I think he's got a good and solid future for him. In the next few years, I can see him in the Premier League. Whether it's for us, I think if we were to sign him, I worry that might signal the diminished ambitions that we've discussed earlier tonight. So, yeah, I'm not sure about that. And the other question about Jethro Williams, I'd be very happy to see him come back. I think he's going to be on a free if he comes back. You could get a very incentivized deal, players who play, because he does have injury problems, and that's the concern. But we've seen it, he can do it in a black and white shirt. And I think we saw that enough, even with the injuries that he had, that if we can structure a deal that works, to go for it. For me, it's a no-brainer. I wanted him in January. He's kind of stuck around in Germany. But yeah, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and another one with Sam Maximan, we mentioned before about him talking about teams that don't challenge and suffer relegation fights every season. Willems coming back would be great for him because they did have a fantastic partnership, and maybe if we show a bit of ambition to Sam Maximan, that will help us. One last question here from Keith just before we wrap it up, because we've managed to get a lot out of a game that we won 1-0. We've not really talked about the game that much, but yeah, we've kind of covered this at the start, but just in case... will we win the last game of the season against Fulham? And do we think that Bruce will match the tally? Well, judging by the injuries for me, I think that Fulham's going to be a bit of a big ask, because they played very well against Man United and deserved the point. I think they fought well at the back. They just can't finish to save their lives. I think there was a run that the Carvalho had, and it was through on goal. It was like, just take that chance, and didn't. I wouldn't be surprised to see us lose this, given the way that we've gone these last few days, and as we said before, Chris, we do seem to be on the beach. So I guess when we're there, we will be on the banks of the Thames, or perhaps in this new swimming pool that Fulham are building on the roof of their stadium. Maybe we'll book a place there.
Yeah, I think it's a bigger ask than tonight, and it would just be typical. I'm not sure if he's fit or not, but it would be typical that Mitrovic would score against us. I think it's going to be a tougher pool. I think they have a little bit more to play. It sounds strange to talk about a relegated side having more to play for, but I think, yeah, Fulham are going to want to go into next season on an up moment, and I think that they do have a lot more about them than Sheffield United. Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I'd probably call it a draw. I think you're right to mention the injuries. That's a real concern, especially if we kind of do field a couple of younger players. And I'm not necessarily saying that I would be against that. I think there's a lot to merit in bringing in a couple of players and blooding them in the Premier League on the last day when we do have nothing to play for. But that and the injuries probably lead me to believe that we're probably not going to get a win there.
Yeah, well, 3 points, and like I said, we are up to 15th. I hope that we can manage to keep it there. It's going to be an interesting end of the season, and I kind of wish that I felt a bit more inspired after watching that game. But 3 points is 3 points, and it doesn't really matter how we get them. This season has been a horrible slog, but I think that the main thing today is the fact that fans were back in the stadium. So good for the fans to see a win. It could have been very toxic had we not won that today, and that really would have set a precedent going forward for the next phase of Steve Bruce, if you want to look at it that way. Next part of this mad show. Pedro just says, what was it again? I've missed the wrong one there. He said something very quickly. I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss this. And look, have I missed the part where we laugh at the Mackhams? Yes, it should be said that Sunderland did lose their first leg of the playoff against plucky Lincoln City. So just goes to show, Chris, it could always be worse, couldn't it?
There is a footballing God.
Yes, thank you very much, Chris. There's going to be more podcasts coming your way. There will be a full dissection, if we haven't done it enough for you yet, of the game that we just won against Sheffield United. Fans are back, and they won't be back for the next game, but they will be next season. So there is hope on the horizon. Thank you very much for joining me, Chris, and thank you to all who watched and sent in questions. We'll see you soon.